Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cadence Partnership Spotlight. Today I have with me Dr. Ryan Cotton from Rocksteady Boxing. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I also have with me Dr. Tyler Susko, my co-founder at Cadence. Hey, Tyler.
Hey, Johannes.
So, folks, I was down in Myrtle Beach a few weeks ago, not for a vacation, but to hang out with the talented folks that are coaches for Rocksteady Boxing. And I can tell it was such an amazing event to meet all these people dedicated to help Parkinson's patients, and I'm really excited to see what they are doing. And it was great to meet you in person, Ryan, as well. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved with Rocksteady Boxing? What's your background?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My background is I'm a physical therapist by training, in uh, a longtime physical therapist, as maybe denoted by my gray hair at this point. I graduated my master's degree in 1998, and then in 2006 finished a doctorate degree from the University of Indianapolis. During that time, I was a practicing therapist. I was in private ortho practice for over 20 years. And shortly after finishing my doctorate degree, I was had a friend who was a patient who was invited on the first board of Rocksteady Boxing. Uh, Me being a newly minted Doctor of Health Science and Physical Therapy, he said, "Hey, do you want to join this board? There's this new organization here in Indianapolis, and they're doing some incredible things for the Parkinson's community. Do you want to be involved in the board? We could use your therapy expertise and your ability to look at research and kind of give us some guidance." Uh, so I was invited to be on the board in 2008 and 2009. To back the bus up a little bit, in 2006, Rocksteady was founded, kind of on accident. Scott Newman was the Marion County prosecutor, which Marion County is Indianapolis.
Hmm.
So he was had a public facing job in Indianapolis. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 39, and his symptoms progressed to the point where they were disruptive to his job.
Oh, wow.
So making public appearances, working the computer all became a challenge to him. And so he had a fellow attorney who was a cop and a former boxer. And this guy said, "Man, I hate to see what this disease is doing to you. It's really affecting your daily life." He's like, "I don't know anything about Parkinson's, but let's start working out." And so they started working out like this guy knew how, like a boxer. So
Yeah.
which nowadays we call high intensity interval training, right? On and off, on and off, on and off. So keep in mind, in 2006, there was zero literature about exercise and Parkinson's disease. At that time, a physician would typically say, "Look, don't fall, don't put yourself at risk, conserve your energy, you'll be battling this disease." And exercise really wasn't recommended. And so Scott and his friend Vince started boxing.
That's so
Again,
interesting. That's at that point in time, people were saying don't exercise, which, it's very well shown that exercise is good at any stage
yeah,
of
yeah,
life. And so it's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah. His symptoms progressed in the right direction. They got better from this exercise, and that turns into what our curriculum is today, right? Our boxing based curriculum is based on what they started doing in 2006. And yeah, to your point, now there's mounds of evidence, lucky for us, mounds of evidence supporting this moderate to high intensity exercise for Parkinson's disease. And it all kind of happened, A, on accident, and B, definitely against medical advice at that point.
Well, that's so fascinating. And so then, when did you become the organization's president and CEO? And I read online you have a little bit of a personal backstory too. That I believe your dad is a Rocksteady boxer as well. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah. I was invited to be on the board in 2008, and I served on the board until 2019. So when I started on the board, we were one gym in one location in Indianapolis. Now we are more than 800 gyms in every state and 14 countries around the world.
Holy
Um,
cow, that's amazing.
yeah, and I was invited to be on the board. I served on the board for about a decade. I was a practicing therapist that whole time, and in 2018, 2019, I was selling my shares of my practice, and my plan was to go into academics. I got that doctorate degree way back in 2006. I thought maybe I would teach. Um, and at that time, the opportunity presented itself as the chief scientific officer for Rocksteady Boxing. And that role was develop and continue to refine the educational curriculum. So I thought, well, A, I have that interest. B, I'm equipped because I've been around the organization for so long. And C, yes, now I have a personal connection. So my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease a couple years after I was involved in the organization. So he was diagnosed in 2011. Um, and so, yeah, it went from initially an interesting idea that a young therapist could help on this board to then this great expansion of what we were doing and the mission of what we were doing, and then add my personal connection in there. So in 2020, I came on as chief scientific officer, and in 2022, I moved into my current role as chief executive officer.
That's awesome. So, can you explain to someone that's not familiar with what it is that you do and how the program works, what it is that it does?
Yeah. It's my father always agreed. He said, if you ever run a study on Rocksteady, I'll agree to be a part of your control group, because he wasn't going to box. He wasn't going to a gym with people with Parkinson's and boxing. So actually, interestingly, early in the organization's life, there was discussion of even removing the word boxing from our title, because our exercise is much more than boxing. Every day in class, part of the curriculum is you put on gloves and you might do a speed bag, you might do a heavy bag. Clearly, we're not hitting each other. We're not sparring with each other. But we decided to keep it in because it's such an integral part of our curriculum. And our curriculum's different from if you or I just went to a fitness location that specialized in boxing fitness. Our curriculum is very specifically designed for people with Parkinson's disease. So big exaggerated movements, lots of multimodal work on balance and agility and vocalization and breathing and posture. All of that is worked into the curriculum very specifically to address the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So if you're going to the local gym and hitting a speed bag, that's great, but our curriculum is much more specifically designed for people with Parkinson's. And, if someone says, well, what does this class look like? Typically, they're 60 to 90 minutes long. General exercise class, a warm up, a cool down. And then in the middle, the workout part is this high intensity interval training where think about stations in a gym. You might do
Yeah.
heavy bag for a minute and then rest for 15 seconds as you move. And then you go do something crazy like burpees or an agility ladder or, a sledgehammer on a tractor tire, right? It's not typical stuff that you would think of someone 65 plus with Parkinson's disease would be doing in a gym. So my first exposure to a Rocksteady class, I'm a clinical therapist at this point, and I thought, dear God, someone's going to die in this class. It's crazy. It's crazy. But now in 2024, we've got all this evidence that says A, multimodal, B, moderate to high intensity, and C, consistency is what's needed in someone with Parkinson's disease. That needs to be their exercise prescription.
That's awesome. Hey, Tyler, so what is your dad's sort of feedback to those classes and his experience been? Can you share?
Yeah, so my dad was diagnosed maybe 3 years ago with Parkinson's, and we had a family friend who was also had Parkinson's, and he joined a gym in Pennsylvania. My parents live in Florida, and so this friend of ours was like, "This is great, you got to try it." So he started boxing probably about a year ago, year and a half or something like that, and he loves it. But to your point, Ryan, it's intense. But to somebody like him, he was very active his whole life. Constantly every weekend. I remember him running, lifting weights, all that kind of stuff. So he was a very active person. And I think when he started getting older and the Parkinson's set in, as you said, Ryan, it kind of his activity level started to slow down, and that's no good. So I think he's really found a great program in the Rocksteady Boxing because he gets out there, he's encouraged. There's people that are specifically thinking about his diagnosis when he's exercising. So I think it's been great. He's doing well. His progression of the Parkinson's is not too drastic. It's progressing, but at a fairly slow rate. So that we're all happy with that. So we're fans.
That's awesome.
That's an interesting point, Tyler, that I said my dad never wanted to join. Well, he eventually did. In the minute he was in there, he's like, oh, yeah, these are my people. And that's part of what goes on in a Rocksteady gym, right? No matter where the gym is around the world, it all has that feel is because everyone in that class has Parkinson's. So I call it the support group with gloves on, right? You're yelling, you're sweating, you're doing your thing, but you're all sharing the same sort of battle and struggles where your dad might feel free to share with someone in class, hey, this is giving me problems. And, that colleague in that class can be like, oh, yeah, I have that too. So there is some of that just community and camaraderie that happens in the class that people can share those challenges. And, I talk about the intensity and the effort that happens in these classes, but also these classes are available to anyone over their progression of the disease, right? So some are high intensity doing burpees and doing tire slams. Others, as the disease progresses, you might have a care partner in class with you where half of the class you're seated, half of the class you're up, and that care partner is there working with you to keep you safe. Keep in mind, we still challenge those people to put forth intensity and effort on their scale, right? Stand up, sit down 10 times for that person could be a huge effort and huge intensity versus someone with young onset Parkinson's disease that's 35 degrees, 2 minutes on a heavy bag might be their intensity. So all of our coaches are certified and understand that progression of the disease and can challenge the individual to meet them where they are that day with their disease progression.
Well, the other thing that I like about it, and I appreciate you telling us about the story of thinking about dropping the name boxing. Boxing is pretty cool. It's something that we found with our product too at Cadence. We try to make things that people want, that make them look good, that make them feel good, that they're doing something that's pretty awesome. And boxing is a pretty cool activity, no matter what age you're at. So I think it gives people something that they could be proud of that they're doing as well.
It's also rhythm.
Yeah, that's the reason. That's the reason we kept it. It's the hook, right? It's the swagger. There's a cool old promotional video that we have that at the end of the video, there's a boxer, Maxine, and Maxine is she has many years of wisdom under her belt. And they said, what does your family, what do your grandkids say when you tell them you box for Parkinson's disease? And she said, oh, they used to laugh. And the interviewer says, oh, they used to laugh. What do they do now? And she says, they don't laugh anymore. Which is part of that swagger, right? Right. That's the coolness of boxing. And let me be clear, boxing is our mechanism of delivery of that moderate to high intensity exercise that fits all those different modes, the balance, the agility, the vocalization. Boxing is our method of delivery. There's no science that says boxing's any better than dancing, is any better than rowing, is any better than ping pong, right? All of those are great interventions for people with Parkinson's. The necessity is the frequency, the consistency, and the intensity, right? So however you're getting your dose, speaking to the Parkinson's community, however you're getting your dose of exercise is what's important. Our mechanism of delivery happens to be boxing. And Tyler, to your point, it's kind of cool. There's some swagger and it's freaking hard, right? Like if you have ever done boxing training,
Oh, absolutely.
You're going to get gassed.
Yep. 3 minutes, I'm done.
Yeah. And that's no one trying to hit you back, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So for someone that isn't familiar, what are sort of the mobility challenges that someone with Parkinson's experience? Whoever of the two of you is inclined to answer that question, please go for it.
Yeah, I mean, your typical mobility problems are slowness of movement, smallness of movement, freezing, so wanting to move and being stuck in place, and then just some postural instability, kind of being forward flexed, which causes some balance difficulty. So all of those things are typical presentations with someone with Parkinson's disease. Part of it is the motor control. Part of it is the trunk and the muscles get stiff and rigid. So again, when I was talking about our curriculum, the size and the exaggeration of the motion, sometimes slowing a motion down and being more purposeful with it. Plus the mobility that you think of with a boxer. You're moving forward, you're moving backwards, you're doing all of those components of our curriculum are specifically to address some of the mobility issues that you see in someone with Parkinson's disease.
Awesome. And so what are typically the results that you, I know that's a loaded question because everyone is probably going to be so different that comes into a Rocksteady boxing environment. But what are some of the results that you guys are seeing through your program?
Well, in its simplest form, what we hear from our participants, both anecdotally and through research, is I move better, I fall less, I have more energy, I have better non-motor symptoms. My anxiety is better, my depression is better, my socialization is better. There's scientific evidence out there that says regular participation in Rocksteady lends to an improved quality of life report for people that are participating, which if you or I could take a pill that improved our quality of life, like as scientists, we kind of glaze over, oh, quality of life, that's cool. But it's a better quality of life for regular participants. And I think that comes from everything that I mentioned, less fall, less fear of falling, better mobility. It's people going to church that were not able to go to church. It's going out to dinner with friends when they were avoiding that. It's all those things are kind of typical and scientifically backed results of the program. And then there's the grand stories, and I'm sure every gym, Tyler, including your dad's, has people with these grand stories of, here at headquarters, we had a retired Marine with young onset Parkinson's disease, and on a good day he'd come in with a cane, and on a bad day he'd come in with a walker. And he'd get to class early to hide his cane and his walker because he didn't want to be the Marine that's using a cane and a walker. Well, 6 to 12 months after participating in the program, my man was running a half marathon. So there's big grand changes like that. We have another HQ boxer in his 70s that ran the Boston Marathon last year. And he wasn't a runner before he participated in Rocksteady boxing. So there are grand stories that can be publicized like that, but there's also all the scientific evidence that says really the symptoms of Parkinson's are improved with participation in Rocksteady. And recent work out of the Netherlands, regular participation in moderate to high intensity exercise can slow the progression of the disease at the brain level, which is really right. That's the nuts and bolts of what we're trying to do is improve quality of life, but extend the duration of this disease and slow the progression. And maybe, Tyler, that may be what you're seeing with your dad is, he's had this disease for a while and its progression is is maybe slowed because of his regular participation in exercise, both now post-diagnosis, but also pre-diagnosis, being a regular exerciser like he was.
There's also something to be said for the fact that you guys are including all these different and diverse movements. I was just at the Ability Lab last week, and I was talking to doctors there. It's a big rehab clinic, for those who don't know, in Chicago. Really well respected, and they're using our shoes with people with Parkinson's too. And I just had asked them, what are your goals with training? And somebody with Parkinson's, because it's a progressive disorder, and he's like, it's progressive, but the body with Parkinson's tends to forget some of the movements it can make. When you start to introduce all these ranges of movement back to the person, they start to realize that the brain starts to say, hey, wait a second, I've got that movement. I understand that feedback coming back to my body, and you can start to regain those movements at a huge level, like you're talking about, Ryan, like these superstars that you're seeing. When they regain the knowledge that these movements are possible because you're running them through all these different types of movements.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's an interesting way of relearning some old material that you've covered in the past. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
And Ryan, when we met down in Myrtle Beach a few weeks ago, of course you got to check out our shoes, and I've been telling the coaches there and explaining what it is that we do. Everyone was like, well, cueing them to pick up their toes, and this isn't that kind of counterintuitive to it? And I was like, well, it sounds like it, but I'm like, you guys are not always there, and then the shoe is there for them, and it's almost like an insurance policy. But I would like to hear your thoughts on what were sort of your first impressions on the shoe, and how does it fit with what you guys do in the toolbox of somebody that has Parkinson's?
Yeah, to me, it's especially for the slice of the Parkinson's community that are the freezers, right? Like a coach can tell you, a spouse can tell you, you can be telling yourself, like, pick up your foot and get moving. And that connection just isn't happening. And I think your shoe gives someone another out in that situation, right? The ability to move the shoe without picking it up, to get feedback from the shoe, especially are people with Parkinson's that get in tight quarters and really get stuck, right? Like, oh, I'm going to have difficulty backing. I think in the kitchen, right? You're in the kitchen, you get into a corner and you're stuck there and you're frozen. And the ability to pivot and rotate on that shoe and get out of that situation and get some of the feedback from the shoe, I think, to me, that's the simplest translation of, hey, there's this idea to, oh, I can see exactly how that's going to work for people functionally with Parkinson's disease when they get in a bind. We've heard from a couple of folks, some of our coaches that are at our coaches conference have Parkinson's disease. And so I've heard from a coach or two with Parkinson's disease that has said, hey, let's give this shoe a try. And once it's tested in real world, they're like, man, this thing is better than advertised. And, they can't explain it like the scientific experts, but they're like, I walk better, I freeze less. If I get freeze, I'm quick to get unfrozen. There's just so many benefits that they see from everyday life in the shoe. And that's just from a couple of our coaches that have Parkinson's disease that have started using the shoe. And, frankly, they probably don't need a big explanation of how and why it works. They just know, man, I move better. And if I get stuck, I get unstuck faster. That's the proof is in the old pudding, as they say.
That's wonderful. Tyler, what was your dad's experience with the shoes? I believe he's still wearing them daily, right?
Yeah, he wears them daily. He goes on his walks outdoors with them. So he's not like I said, he got it a few years ago, so it's not super progressed, but he uses them. And I think, Johannes, you'd said about the kind of like that secondary insurance policy of if you accidentally come in contact with the floor, it kind of slides. About 3 or 4 months ago, he had a really bad fall. He wasn't in our shoes. He was walking around barefoot in his house, and he just stubbed his toe and he went over. And then that was a big bruise to the tailbone, and he was worried he broke it for a while. He didn't, luckily, but he that's been since then. I sent him a second pair and said, inside, just wear these two, please. Go on your walks, but use them indoors too. So we got the second pair there. We'll keep shipping them more.
That's great.
Yeah.
Ryan, where do you take Rocksteady Boxing next? I believe you said 800 locations in the US and also some globally. What's your vision for the organization going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. We didn't start teaching other people how to do Rocksteady until 2012, 2013. So the development of those more than 800 locations has been in the last 10 years. We grew really fast, which when you grow really fast, it's difficult for infrastructure to keep up. So in the last 2 years since I've been in my chair as chief executive officer, I've been doing the behind the scenes kind of unsexy work of getting infrastructure in place to support all our affiliates. Keep in mind, when I came on to Rocksteady, our mission was serve the people in the gym in Indianapolis, because there was one gym. So our board of directors we've changed our mission, right? We're serving the people in our gym, but we're serving our coaches and affiliates around the world so they can serve their community, right?
Yeah.
Because our reach in the Parkinson's community is through our coaches and our affiliates. So I think the biggest thing in the next, let's say, 2 years in front of me is, now that we have infrastructure in place, how can I use that infrastructure to better equip the coaches in the gym in Florida, the coaches in the gym in Tokyo, to really reach out to their community? So it's, making sure our education is up to current scientific practice, which we now have a great education team that is continually updating our training because the science is changing on a daily basis. And then really getting a unified message out. So if you're the gym in Florida, you're the gym in Tokyo, that your message is the same going out to your community as it is here in Indianapolis, as it is in Albuquerque, right? So there's a consistency of message, there's a consistency of brand. And speaking of the Shirley Ryan Lab in Chicago, they're helping us do a study about the fidelity of the Rocksteady program. Like, what really are the core components of Rocksteady that make it Rocksteady, no matter if you're in Florida or in Tokyo or in Albuquerque. So having that study done and completed will then let us, again, support all these affiliates and say, here's the recipe to make sure you're delivering the best program you can deliver. We as an organization are doing research that is showing the outcomes, but we can only show the outcomes if you're following the recipe. So it's getting that recipe from, in 2006, which is a crazy idea for boxing for exercise, now, which is a pretty refined idea for boxing for exercise, figuring out what that recipe is and ensuring that it's delivered location to location so everybody's getting the same Rocksteady experience when they're there.
And you do this by certifying the coaches or your affiliates that are giving these classes and facilitating the exercise. I was just down, like I said, in Myrtle Beach, and that recertification was happening. Can you describe what the process is like? And we have a part of our community are physical therapists, doctors throughout the country. How can they get involved with you guys?
Yeah, our certification process is new. I'm guilty of bringing that in as the chief scientific officer, because early in our training, we trained people how to do Rocksteady and said, good luck, high five, and they went out and did it. But our curriculum, it evolves all the time based on the science. So now anyone delivering Rocksteady in a group setting recertifies every 2 years. So we grab a hold of the literature, we're refining what our methodology looks like, and every 2 years, all our coaches recertify to make sure they're delivering current best practices. We also train physical therapists, occupational therapists to deliver Rocksteady one-on-one in a clinical setting. So just like if you went to a physical therapist or occupational therapist for a treatment session, we teach them the Rocksteady method so they can use some of that method in that individual session. So those are really our two mechanisms of delivery of Rocksteady. One is the group exercise, which is the real traditional, and the other is one-on-one with a therapist in the clinic. So, we have a chief scientific officer and director of education and training, and they are continually updating that process in our educational curriculum. Just this year, a whole new coaches curriculum was introduced in July of this year. And so those training now are learning not 100% different for sure, but 10, 15, 20% new information that they're integrating into the curriculum now. So when folks recertify, they get that new dose as well.
Awesome. For our customers and community members that have Parkinson's or their support system, we see that often that someone buys our shoes for someone else. How can they participate in Rocksteady Boxing? How can they find a location? What's the best way for them to find you guys?
Yeah, our website is rocksteadyboxing.org. We're a nonprofit, so Rocksteady Boxing, all one word, .org. And in there's a find a location tab where you can search by zip code, and it'll tell all the affiliate locations and all the clinicians within a search radius. There's also a map on a world map on the website where if you're going to Albuquerque for a vacation and you don't know the zip code, you can just zoom in on Albuquerque and it'll show you the locations there.
Is it a nationwide membership? So like I sign up with, say, the one in Santa Barbara. I'm not sure if we have one, but just for the sake of the argument. And if I go somewhere else, can I just go to that location? Is that how that works?
No, all of them are independent functioning. But that happens, right? Like if you're going somewhere on vacation, someone with Parkinson's disease, their exercise is, I would argue, as important as their medicine. So if they're traveling somewhere, it's not uncommon that they look up a location nearby. They'll call the coach ahead of time and say, hey, I'm from Santa Barbara. I'll be in Albuquerque. Can I stop in? And the coach will typically say, yes, you can stop in. There's a, $5, $10, whatever class fee.
That's awesome.
We'll do a quick little assessment of you to make sure the coach understands your function and your ability to get in class. But yeah, that's pretty frequent that as people travel, they'll visit other locations. And the other thing, your physical therapist, your occupational therapist, your physicians that might be interested in training, same website, right? rocksteadyboxing.org, and all the training information. There's a tab that says for professionals that you can look up how to train for group classes or how to train for the clinical delivery for the PTs and OTs.
Awesome. Well, I want to hand it over to both of you for, closing thoughts. It was so great to have you on the show, Ryan. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Indianapolis next year. We'll be back at Coaches Con, but yeah, I'd like to turn it over to you, Tyler, first, and then to you, Dr. Ryan Cotton, for closing thoughts.
Yeah, I just appreciate Ryan taking the time to join us here today. It's great to hear about your program. It's always fun for me to hear kind of how you kind of came to be in Rocksteady and understanding your path. It's really helpful coming from all the way from therapy to running the whole organization. 800 locations is so impressive, and I think that's great. I love what you guys are doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, yeah. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing what you guys do for the Parkinson's population, right? To me, Tyler, to you as well, there's a very personal connection to that population. The day you're diagnosed with a progressive degenerative neurologic disease is a pretty bad day, right? Like on paper, that's your best day because it gets worse from here. And that day of diagnosis, hope can leave the building, right? Man, that's a bad day. And I think one thing that we do, one thing that equipment like you guys have can give people hope of saying, hey, with this shoe, I can move better and I can walk better. I don't know why, but I move better and I walk better. And when people wander into a Rocksteady gym, they say, Well, there's a bunch of people in there with the same diagnosis as I am, and they're doing something about it, and they're gladly and happily doing something about it. So I thank you guys for your work, and I hope what we do in our gyms can provide some of that hope to which can be a hopeless diagnosis. And frankly, I hope I'm unemployed someday because there's a cure for the disease. But until then, we're going to keep serving the people today and giving them something to do today that can change their lives, change their quality of life for the better, even with their diagnosis. So, again, thanks for having me. And I'm so blessed to do what I do and serve this community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And folks, we'll see you on the next show.